My name's Jeff Mulgan from UCL, and I'll be air traffic control for the next 60 minutes as we try and focus in a very rapid fire focused way on the question here, whether innovation districts can encourage inclusive growth. And in a way, it's a two-part question. One is, what have we learned about what makes innovation districts work at all? There are plenty of examples of failure. But how can they succeed in ways which really generate opportunities for people already living in the cities, maybe on the outskirts of the cities, maybe on a wider region, rather than just a very small pocket? And we have fantastic speakers from 4 continents and some academics who've thought very deeply about these questions. And I hope we will then have plenty of time for comments and questions. Please use the chat function in real time to respond, either if there's something you don't agree with, or if you want to share a link, or there's a crucial fact. We often find the chat in these sessions is as important as the words. The session is public and will be recorded, so don't say anything deeply troubling, secret, or intimate. You may find it spreads all over the internet. This is part of a broader program of work IPPO's doing with the International Public Policy Observatory. We've worked on many topics, beginning with the COVID pandemic and including issues like net zero and all its dimensions, but trying to bring together evidence and working with policymakers to make sense of that evidence and to apply it. So hopefully that's roughly what you were expecting. And I'm now going to hand over to Hope McGee, my colleague at IPPO, who's been working on developing sort of systems mapping frameworks for this topic. We've been trying to develop new ways of doing systems maps to guide decision making. If you're interested, last year we did you showed lots of the frontiers of system mapping methods. And sometimes they're wonderful, but sometimes they're so complicated, they're very hard to use for decisions. We're trying to grapple with bridging the gap between really complexity and simplicity. So Hope, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thanks for joining today. We've got a roundtable on how innovation districts encourage inclusive growth. And we've got a great lineup of guests from Massachusetts, Melbourne, Medellin, and Barcelona, and we're going to hear from each of them, special experts, for 5 minutes before going into a plenary discussion. And I'm going to give a brief overview of our work in this area. So over the last 30 years, cities across the world have kind of sought to encourage economic growth and innovation through instituting innovation districts, kind of geographical clustering of research, enterprise and development, usually around an anchor institution or a major university or company. But with patterns of work and play changing, attracting talent has increasingly meant locating districts in cities or building on organic clusters encouraged by the urban settings agglomeration effects. And while many have been successful in bringing economic growth, like most urban regeneration strategies, the big challenges they've faced are around how to kind of ensure the benefits are shared with local people, as well as mitigating against side effects such as displacement and gentrification. And countering the risks of increasing spatial inequality often means ensuring districts build on existing networks and heritage. They maintain a level of local ownership and employ neighbourhood suppliers and talent. With the UK government increasing investment in innovation, it's an important time to ask kind of how policy can encourage fairer place-based models of innovation. And through our initial systems mapping session with experts from the UK, we were kind of able to understand the core inputs and challenges faced by those working on developing innovation districts. And the core components including investment, private and public, spatial development of physical and social infrastructure, and also human capital, attracting, developing, connecting talent together, and importantly, kind of governance and culture. And then we focused on building up a, And then we focused on building up a layer which picked out tools for inclusive innovation, a district that seeks to encourage invention and growth in the economy while also building community wealth. And we honed in on often tactical practices that can bring benefit to a larger set of existing residents. We identified several examples that have kind of carefully considered how to do innovation districts in an inclusive way, and several of which you will hear about today. And these include inventions in areas of employment, of good work charters, living wages, developing local talent pipelines. Within the area of education, tools can include collaboration, local schools, public events, and also encouragement of local businesses, particularly SMEs, through funding challenges, procurement targets, and affordable startup space and business support can help in kind of building on the ingenuity of local people of transplanting an existing enterprise with kind of unfamiliar new industry. Likewise, innovation districts can also make social impact central to their mission, targeting investment and human capital towards emerging issues from the aging population to the climate crisis. And like I said, we've identified numerous examples of tools deployed by successful innovation districts to kind of encourage and nurture benefits for local people. So often place-based elements make the replication of these sort of practices quite nuanced, which is why today we're kind of bringing together senior leaders today from in-depth discussion in context before opening to a wider debate. We've also got an evidence review underway by the EPI Centre, and IPPO is continuing to explore possible interventions available to innovation districts and city governments in this area. And part of today is about that. So I'll hand over to Isabel now.
I'm so pleased to be here and share some experience and some thought in innovation districts. I will share a little presentation about the 22 Act and try to solve all the questions related on how to do the biggest effort in the way to include locals in the innovation districts. As most of you will know, 22 Act has started the plans in the 2000s, so it's 24 years ago, and we are still under construction. I'm always saying that 22 Act won't be 22 Act if it's not inside of Barcelona. You have to think that nowadays Barcelona is a very interesting space in Europe, and in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of talent and investment attraction. And I think 22 Act has contributed on it, but at the same time helps 22 Act to be as big as successful is it. But for us, it's very important to have some data related and to know that the ecosystem of startups is growing every day. So on these terms, in the 22 Act nowadays is people come and say it's the first innovation districts in the world, is one of the first European innovation hub. And we have a lot of companies inside, but one thing I think is the most important nowadays is that we have a huge amount of sustainable buildings. The efforts put it on this part is so strong for the investors and construction and all the people that are now rebuilding because rebuilding the space, because most of you will know that 22 Act was an industrial land and is a space in transformation. So we are still in the construction, but it's a space that we have to transform. The total amount of hectares that is the 22 Act is 200 hectares. So it's a big amount of space. And as a construction and as the way that has been planned from the 2000 is in a way to combine urban development with economics development and talent attraction. In this way, I think it's important to know that nowadays the district has 12,150 companies settled, has 13 startup accelerators, has the number of big companies that has been settled in the last years is so big. We have 2 technological centers, 37 co-workings, and 16 universities and business schools. For us, it's very interesting to see that the initial plans of the development includes the way of structure urban clusters in different sectors. This planning started with having technological sector, having energy sector on it, having design and media, and having here health sector. In the way of these clusters has been developed is to put a big company, a university, a technological research center, some residents for the students in the same square. I think during this planification, it's interesting to know that one of the clue of the success is to have all together in the same corner. And in terms of having more inclusion for green and for people being there is, I think one of the clue of the success is putting more green, 10% in green, 10% in social housing during the transformation from the industrial soil to new offices and new knowledge spaces. So in these terms, having affordable houses is quite interesting for the districts and has increased the connection with the residents. Another thing for this inclusive planning during all the transformation, and we're still doing, is to have an engagement with local people. In the way of we had the first urban planning of the 2021 that is different from the other parts of the district. Started from the beginning, but in the 2020, we had the second phase of the urban planning of the district.
And, 30 seconds, Isabel, just give you time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in these plans, I have the book here, and directly the planning includes all the statements, neighbors, and everyone to do this pact and to create the new development of the district. So they create directly this book is in Catalan, you don't see it, but it's a book with all the words and interests of all the statements in the district. As in the triple helix, everyone says, is putting together the university, the governance, the industry, and at the same time, the neighbors on the table to try to talk about how to include all the parts in the plans of the district. And the other thing is putting the training and community spaces in front of directly the people and the people that is living here, and the people still some plans of community spaces to share knowledge, in some cases to do some trainings, to do some reskillings, etc. And I think we are growing on these spaces and trying to put more efforts and working all together. And as an association is one of our main purpose to help all these entities to work together in benefit of the district.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And I know there's a lot of material online about what Barcelona has done. Our next speaker is Vanessa from Melbourne. I slightly dread to think what time it might be for you, but thank you very much for joining us very late in the evening. Vanessa, over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, and happy Wednesday, everyone. It's just ticked over to 12:15 in the morning here on Wednesday morning. So it's great to be with you all, and please bear with me if I'm not quite as mentally sharp as those of you that are sitting there in your lovely mornings and early afternoons. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit. We're at quite a different stage, I think, to Barcelona. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Melbourne, I think, first, and then we'll talk about how I think the University of Melbourne's contributing to overcoming what I think is our biggest inclusion challenge here in Melbourne. So to just give you a quick run through Melbourne, for those of you that aren't as familiar with it, it's around about 5 million people. It's a similar size to Sydney. It'll be Australia's largest city within the next few years. It sits within Australia's most educated state. So we've got 8 public universities in Melbourne and surrounds. And it's home to the Parkville Biomedical Precinct, which many of you will have heard of, which is probably Australia's best known innovation precinct. And that's over 40 hospitals, medical research institutes, biotechnology organisations and universities in quite a small area, probably about 2 kilometres from the Melbourne CBD. So I think, some great things there about Melbourne. This is educated population, a lot of opportunities, I think, associated with that, and certainly a city of quite a moderate size. But I think our biggest challenge is in supporting local innovation. Australia produces a lot of research, so there's lots and lots of research in terms of volume. We've got about 0.3% of the world's population, but we produce around about 3% of the world's research. So there's certainly no issues in terms of the R part of R&D. But I think much of Australia's research is commercialised overseas, so those benefits are not flowing through as well as we would like to the local population here in Australia. And I think that's our biggest inclusion challenge. So there's a lot of reasons for that, and I won't go into it in too much detail other than to sort of paint you a picture. We're a country of small businesses. About 93% of businesses have 20 people or less. And a lot of the larger businesses, the multinationals in Australia, don't tend to do their R&D here in Australia. I mean, there are exceptions, but generally they don't tend to do their R&D here. So a lot of smaller businesses, lower levels of economic complexity. We're 93rd on the Harvard Economic Complexity Index. And again, before I talk about our good things again, we're the second lowest in the OECD for business collaboration with higher education or public research organisations. So we're producing this great research, we've got a highly educated population, but we're just not ticking over to being able to commercialise that locally. And I think one of the things that we're doing well at is through the University of Melbourne, where I work, is that we're developing a network of innovation assets and associated programs, not quite as well defined as the clusters, say, of Barcelona, but we're putting innovation assets into various areas around Melbourne. They're different, just as Hope said. It's about the nuance of local place. So it is the assets are different to each other, but generally they involve co-location of industry, university, sometimes hospital tenants. There's a range of tenancy sizes and terms that work for businesses of different ages and stages. They've got shared use of scientific equipment, labs, platforms, and some of them have collaboration space programs, investment funds associated with them. And one that I particularly wanted to highlight that I think is doing well in the inclusion area is Melbourne Connect, which is opened fairly recently in 2021. It's a digitally focused innovation precinct. It's got really significant amount of collaboration space. I'd say, I think it's about twice the size of the collaboration space in Boston District Hall. And it's got some spaces that are free to use. So it's sitting there right on the edge of the Parkville Biomedical Precinct that I mentioned earlier, but it's probably got the biggest amount of collaboration space that draws people in locally. So there's more collaboration space than the tenants of the building could possibly use, even if they were all down there being really busy all at once. It's really a heart creating both a front door and a backyard, I think, to the university. And one of the things that works well with it is it's got a variety of income sources that mean that it can offset the operation of the collaboration space and the associated activation program, which I think helps the university to think long term, and then put in further inclusion programs around particular equity groups or around particular types of businesses. So some of those income sources like tenant levy, retail lease, catering, space hire, events, sponsorship. So those things are just pumping away, creating a virtuous cycle where that they can fund this place being activated, vibrant, and serving the broader community. The university then layers a partnership program over the top of this, linking tenants with the university. So I think this network of assets, just to sum up, it enables tenants to locate close to the university within that supportive innovation community. And it's got that range of flexible tenancies and options so that you can work with either spin-outs of the university or those that want to come and locate close by. So I think this is how the university leverages physical innovation assets to grow innovation locally.
Great. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Now we're going to switch across the world to Carlos from Ruta N in Medellin, in Colombia.
Thank you so much for inviting us. This is Ruta N. Ruta N is the science, technology, and innovation hub of the city of Medellin. We are a 100% owned by the local government institution, and we lead Medellin's economic transformation from a manufacturing economy to a knowledge-based economy. Part of what we have been doing since 2014 is that we are transforming our economy, and we are consolidating an innovation district. This innovation district is located in the north part of the city. Is 172 hectares of land around around Ruta N and around the University of Antioquia, that is our main anchor institution. One of the challenges that we have, talking about inclusive growth, is that we have more than 150 owners of land. And the people that is so it's quite complicated. The people that's trying to develop an innovation district knows what it means. So it means that we have to deal with 150 different landowners. And to promote inclusive growth, what we have been doing is at the beginning, like mapping the kind of businesses that these guys have beyond just owning the land. We discovered that we are surrounded with a lot of little businesses to fix cars, of little businesses or little restaurants, and little and quite poor Airbnbs to talk, like global, right? So what we have been developing from this inclusive growth perspective is that we develop a program that is called Cocina Abierta in Spanish, or Open Kitchen in English. That's the way I can translate that. So it means that we take the best restaurants of the city of Medellin to teach to the restaurants of this zone how to perform better. And it has been quite impressive, because they are adapting to this new economy that is coming to this zone, and we are avoiding the gentrification phenomenon. At least they already have the menu in English. They already know how to sell to foreign people that is coming to this new economy in this zone, and they have grown in sales, in revenue, 20% in 6 months. That's what happens with that program. So that's one of the ways we promote inclusive growth. Also, we try to develop what we call transformative business models. It means that we take the businesses that fix cars around the zone, and we try to develop a new business model so they can perform better. And that's the way we are trying to avoid that they have to leave this zone, because we came here with the innovation district. What we want is We want them to perform better, and we want them to perform better and to have more welfare because we came here, not the opposite. And so far, we have one building. We have a building, one main building that is the center of gravity, that is called Ruta N. Around we have the University of Antioquia. The University of Antioquia is one of the most important anchor institutions and is the main landowner of our innovation district. Our main strengths are specifically on this area is on biomedical and life sciences, earth and life sciences, physics and engineering, mathematics and computer sciences, and social sciences and humanities. That's basically our main strengths, talking about this little portion of the city of Medellin. One of the questions that we have and we can discuss is, does it have to be place-based? Because what we know is that the innovation district, in our case, the whole ecosystem is the whole city, not only a part of it. And now, basically to end up, we are part of the GIID network, as well as Melbourne and other innovation districts here. And at the same time, we have some success cases of entrepreneurs that are performing really quite good. In example, One Enterprises is a startup from here that is developing AI software for the energy industry, and now is being accelerated in the United States. And as well, we have huge companies like Accenture's NanoLab, that is, they take their customers here to our innovation district to develop solutions to their problem with us in the innovation district and with our startups as well. So far, to end up, so far we have attracted almost 500 companies from over 33 different countries. They have created 25,000 qualified jobs. Our main strengths are located in the industries of energy, health, and IT. And finally, we were investing around the 0.8% of our economy, of our GDP, local GDP, on science, technology, and innovation activities in 2014. Now we are investing around 3% of our GDP in activities related to science, technology, and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And I actually haven't, I've been twice to Ruta N, but not for 10 years. So it's exciting to hear how much has progressed over the recent years. And our last speaker from the practical implementation side is Beth from Boston, though in fact from Cambridge, I guess, to share with us a Kendall Square story.
And thank you to Jeremy, who will be moving my slides forward for me. So first of all, it is really a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share all that is happening in Kendall Square. I would say, and all that we are doing. I have been here for about 2 years now, but the Kendall Square Association has been here for 16. And frankly, the history of this place, maybe not as old as some of the European countries, but dates back 400 years when it was really marshland. I shared this photo here. We not so humbly have earned the phrase the most innovative square mile on the planet. And a group of students put together this, we call it the looking glass, and it seems to be a very popular place to pose. And the reason I included this photo is because this is a group of students that all live within 2 blocks of Kendall Square. And they have really developed a program about 2 blocks and how important it is to connect people who live around Kendall Square with what's happening in Kendall Square. So as I said, we go back 400 years when we were still a marsh. And Jeremy, if we could move to the next slide, we were really just marshland, and eventually the land became a port. And like others I've heard here, we became industrial space. Then there's been a history of creativity in Kendall Square, from the development of simple things that we take for granted today, like flexible rubber hoses, a center aisle on a train car, tubeless bike tires, And then MIT moved just over 100 years ago from Boston to Cambridge. And the industrial nature of the land continued with soap and candy, but quickly segued to include really innovations that, again, we all rely on today, from radar to microwave, to the Apollo moon missions, planes, missiles, you name it. And then Biogen was the first biotech company here in Kendall Square and on through. And I think that the real key, people ask me, what is the secret sauce, or what is the special, what sort of ignited Kendall Square? And I have to say that I really think it is the fact that we have shared purposes, and that folks are really committed to solving the challenges both locally and globally that we face, and solving together. So if we go to the next slide, we have identified and looked at the academic research from everyone from the Brookings Institution on through to identify what are the key innovation drivers, because we want to continue to be one of the world's most innovative regions, or as we say, square mile. We believe actually our small size is one of our strengths. It is an incredibly walkable city, or walkable area. And we think that the connectivity that engenders for people, we refer to it as the bump factor, and really it's a very interconnected community. So I think if you look at all 10 of these, probably most all of our innovation districts have these in different degrees, but we feel like these are the top 10 innovation drivers in Kendall Square, starting with the presence of key stakeholders from MIT to research institutions like the Broad Institute, the Whitehead Institute, as well as large, small corporations, funders, nonprofits, government support, because we have both public-private partnerships. And I think most importantly, that folks are purpose-driven, as I mentioned earlier. So I will move to the next slide and hope that folks have a sense of who we are. In terms of what the Kendall Square Association, which I lead here, we were founded 16 years ago, and we've really identified these 3 pillars of work that we do. It's critical that we connect and convene the people here on topics that matter, so that we have the benefit of the leading minds in this area, whether their domain is life science or technology or climate tech or whatever type of technology, that it's really, we really harness the thoughtfulness of our leaders. Amplify and promote, we find folks get very immersed in their research or in their efforts to commercialize a particular research topic. So we really see it as important for us as the Kendall Square Association to amplify within the community and beyond through our weekly newsletter what's happening here, what our members are doing, and what sort of the opportunities they have to connect. Last year, we had over 1,000 events and programs that are hosted, as my colleague from down under said earlier. Our landlords and tenants really have the opportunity to connect around art or fitness, music, you name it. And also, we as we move forward, we hope to spend a little more time promoting Kendall Square and what we do. And then collaborate and advocate really is, again, bringing people together to bring the best ideas forward about how we can best solve the challenges we face locally, whether that is transportation or increasing the amount of housing we have in the area. So moving to our next slide, the Kendall Square Association itself, like we really, go ahead.
30 seconds maybe, Beth.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think one of the keys is that we have a large board of 28 members, and we ensure that everybody in the community is represented, predominantly life sciences, but we also have representation from tech and real estate, nonprofits, and our restaurants. Nobody is left out of the leadership process here. So let me move to the last slide, because I think that it's really important to understand that the impact Kendall Square has had on the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is a city of 117,000 people in 7 square miles, has really been tremendous in that the funding and the tax revenue that we provide has allowed for universal pre-kindergarten, some of the highest spending per student in the state, and Massachusetts is among the highest in the US, a guaranteed income program, low property tax rates for our residents, as well as workforce development and training. Cambridge and Kendall Square specifically, it's a heart that we call it the beating heart of the life science economy and the tech economy here in Massachusetts. There are 101 Nobel laureates that come from this area. And then I think it's really all brought together by the fact that folks here truly are committed to improving human health, addressing climate change, and developing ethical AI solutions. So that's what I think our special sauce is. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. And it's really interesting to focus actually on the relational sort of side of all of this, the human side, as much of the buildings. Could I maybe ask all of you, Isabel, Vanessa, Carlos, and Beth, if there are particular things you could put in the chat which you think would be useful for people to read, because I know you've been very compressed on time, that would be great. And we're now going to turn to two very experienced academic commentators on all of this. First of all, Kieran Flanagan from Manchester, and then Kevin Morgan, before we move into a quick Q&A comment session. So Kieran, how do you think we should think about these various dilemmas and inclusive growth?
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to the speakers for those really interesting introductions and kind of presentations of the cases. I think so. I'm going to speak as an academic who studies innovation policy broadly. Reaction came up there from my thumbs up. Who studies innovation policy broadly and is interested in innovation districts as an example of an attempt to make kind of innovation happen in places more often. I think the first thing we should acknowledge is that innovation is actually very difficult to stimulate. I mean, innovation happens all the time, but it's hard to stimulate. Place-based innovation is even more difficult in a world of global knowledge networks where new technologies emerge in many different places simultaneously. So I think whenever we try to do something in terms of stimulating innovation, in terms of making and implementing innovation policy, we always need to be humble in our expectations and honest about the challenges. Having said that, cities are the nodes, generally speaking, in those global knowledge networks, and cities absolutely should be thinking about the kinds of innovation they want, and not just to capitalize on their place in those networks, but also in terms of the problems and challenges that they face themselves and which sometimes are shared by other cities. And I think probably a broader rather than a narrow high-tech definition of innovation is going to be most likely to be appropriate for place-based innovation strategies in general. So innovation districts are interesting because they've become a kind of the strategy du jour for driving urban innovation. And it's something different. It's not an urban science park. It's not a hipster neighborhood or a creative milieu or older ideas, but something different, a mixed use urban kind of zone of entrepreneurial, creative and an innovative economic activity, often leveraging the presence of universities or firms. But I think when we talk about innovation districts, we need to think about what kind of innovation and what kind of district we want. So when we say mixed use, what mix of uses? I think innovation districts, there's many cases of innovation districts around the world, and we've heard of some really interesting cases today. But generally speaking, innovation districts remain under-conceptualized, and of course that's part of the attraction. It's a fuzzy concept, which gives a lot of traction to policymakers and practitioners. There are not that many academic studies of innovation districts, although most of the ones we've heard about today have been studied by academics, so they're the exceptions. There are all kinds of questions thrown up by the few academic studies that we do know of, questions of ownership and governance of the space. Some have got a key landowner, others do not. Integration of the innovation district into the broader economic, social and cultural strategy of the city or city region. Questions we've already heard about of curation and activation. We know from earlier waves of research on science and technology parks that that many tenants in those places don't use the services provided, or if they do, they don't rate them as very important. It's generally the brand of the place that's most important. That might be the case for many innovation districts as well. We genuinely don't know, but we need to understand better why organizations locate their activities in an innovation district and what they think they get from it. In terms of inclusion, a few innovation districts have explicitly sought to drive inclusion, to enhance community engagement and build a platform for inclusive innovation. But there's been very little research on that so far. To understand how innovation districts can really support inclusivity, social equity and sustainability, we kind of need to think about what the theory of change is, I think. The theory of change of innovation districts is implicit. And that means, of course, we don't have a way of measuring their success. The evidence that's offered for the success of innovation districts is generally activity measures, and there's no counterfactual to compare it to. So we need to know much more about kind of what innovation districts are trying to achieve, how central inclusivity is to that, how central embeddedness in broader regional, national and international networks is a goal in those things. And we need to understand whether innovation districts are really examples of place-based innovation or just a kind of attractor for the relocation of activities that would happen in other places. And we need to think about this in the long term. We've heard from earlier presentations a long history of successful innovation districts like Kendall Square and the really ambitious 22 out in Barcelona, 24 years of history, through to NA been going a long time. The really successful cases have long histories. They don't happen in a short time span. So I think we need to think about that as well.
Many thanks, Kieran. And yes, they are difficult to get right, and they take a time. I could ask you, and I'll ask Kevin as well. Do put in the chat anything you think people should be reading, which is our overviews, academic studies. Kevin Morgan from Cardiff, over to you. Hope you're ready to share some thoughts with us.
Many thanks, Jeff. I was asked to speak more generally about whether innovation districts can enhance inclusive growth. And I think the answer is it depends. It depends on three things, for example, on the nature of innovation, on the policy repertoire, and on the developmental model in which it's framed. And in the interest of time, Jeff, let me just say very quickly one or two things about each of these three things. On innovation, the innovation district, to my mind, is a kind of belated, spatialized version of the triple helix, bringing together government, industry, and research. At worst, the triple helix is basically a very narrow science and technology framing of innovation. But even worse, it can even be a camouflaged version of a real estate pitch. And we need to be, not too cynical, but we need to be aware of that, the repurposing and valorization of urban property. So it depends on the nature of innovation. That's the first point. In terms of the policy repertoire, I think innovation districts can play a role if they're part of an integrated policy repertoire which involves policies that we don't normally associate with innovation. Real living wage policies, local talent pipelines, value-based public procurement in an integrated suite of policies. And integration is easier said than done for all the reasons we know about cross-government action. And the third point, Jeff, I'd mention, is it depends on the developmental model. For example, in Wales, we're trying to draw on the foundational economy as part of an innovation model, which stresses those sectors which rarely enter science and technology. Dignified elder care, food, energy, social housing, all part of social innovation that you know very, very, very well. And the developmental model internationally is changing. And I would just mention one thing for colleagues. At the end of May, the Berlin Summit Declaration was announced, about a new developmental model for all of us that stresses not narrow metrics of economic growth, but shared prosperity and better quality jobs. If that's part of the narrative, Jeff, I think they can contribute to inclusive growth. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you all for such interesting and concise talks. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left. We promised we would finish a little bit early, so people have time before their 4 o'clocks. But let's focus in actually where Kevin left off. There's a sort of logic pattern in what everyone has said, and I'd like to see if we can have some very brief comments on these. One is the premise, which goes back to Alfred Marshall longer, that actually concentration of activity does lead to bigger net, and to growth for everyone. Now, that may be less true than 10 or 20 years ago, but it's a key premise of innovation districts that is still true. And then we've heard about there's some ways innovation districts can benefit the wider community through tax, which does matter, which allows you to pay for all sorts of good things. And then a whole repertoire of more targeted policies on everything from apprenticeships, talent pipelines, helping schools, kindergartens, and so on. And I guess each of those is contestable. And for each of those, one might want evidence on what actually is impactful. So at this point, perhaps we might just take some comments about how you would frame any of the key components of those questions and how one should go about to find out which of them are true or not. So, for example, at least in theory, you could have a wonderfully generous set of programs on elder care and childcare and so on, but it would cost so much that you would crush the ability of your nascent innovation district to thrive. So, would anyone like to ask? And that's sort of my framing, but we've got a bit of time. If anyone wants to ask a question or a comment, either put your hand up or put it in the chat. I'll turn to any of my colleagues, whether Jeremy, Hope, or others would like to say anything or ask anything. Otherwise, I will go round and perhaps ask each of you to just to give 30 seconds of response to what you've heard from the others. And I guess in particular, this question about what would allow, and let's maybe start with you, Isabel, in 20 years' time, people living well away from 22, for them to feel they've really benefited, their lives have been transformed by it. Or maybe that's straightforward, maybe they already feel that. So perhaps we could go round and ask each of you just for a quick thought, but very much focusing on the inclusivity part of the question. So Isabel, first to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, some people nowadays are thinking that the project is going good from the perspective of the people living here because they are still living here. Some of them doesn't because they have to move in other spaces. But we work together to have more people all together in the district and have some spaces and activities to work together. That's why the best principles of innovation thinking district, I think, is to have people that are working and living in the same space and ensuring that this is well done all over the years. In some cases, they have moved, but now some people are returning. So I think that this is the clue of the success nowadays. And having more companies settled in the district benefits of people coming back and working on these new companies settled. And the same as others said, as having a vibrant district, I think it's one of the main purpose to having more restaurants, more activities. And as association, we do this. We do a lot of activities after work, but during the labor time too, to attract people and people that are in some cases in teleworking, so to try to come to the district. And we have a working commission to help people with less activity or that they are poor in this moment to bring to work together And I think this is a labor that we are settling more and more.
Thank you, Isabel. There's a question in the chat from Keelan Freeman. Jeremy, could you put it in the chat to everyone? Because I'm fairly certain someone here has an answer to it, which is really about how much co-location influences commercialization options, or how you ensure co-location does improve commercialization of research. But perhaps if you could put that in the everybody chat. And then Vanessa, maybe some brief reflections from you on what allows, again, your similar sized city to Barcelona, the people who may not feel initially part of the core city, university life, how do they feel a real benefit, change to their life prospects from the district?
It's a great question, and I think it's almost a second tier for us, is that yes, you can get this great network of innovation assets. They tend to be located quite close to the city area that are not accessible necessarily to everyone. But by getting these anchors setting up in multiple locations that have a strong income stream associated with them, you can then put in additional programs that apply to those locations themselves. For example, we've got a social impact accelerator program that's particularly for social impact businesses. We've got others that are more focused at particular equity groups, women, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, and I think then it's also people from regional areas, because when we talk about innovation districts, we do tend to talk more about city areas. And I think reaching the benefits into some of our universities which are based in more regional areas would be a great partnership for us.
Yeah, and you are a very big country geographically, so that kind of matters. Carlos, a quick thought from you, and including perhaps on that outreach, and Medellin did some extraordinary things on urban geography and social division, as well as the district.
Oh, okay, from our point of view, as well as Melbourne, we do not only support high tech, high impact and technology-based businesses. We also have several partners supporting social businesses, social impact businesses. And from the accessibility point of view, what we have done is that we have created the innovation district where the innovation dynamic was already in place. I mean, we're not creating a dynamic where the dynamic did not exist. So it's quite easy for us to bring the people together, because we have, the most accessible place from the transportation, public transportation point of view. We have our botanical garden that we have a lot of events there. At the same time, we have our planetarium that is like a place with like a universe. It's a place to observe, to see the universe as well. And we also have our Explora Park, that is the place where the kids come to learn about science and technology since they're kids. And I'll say that's the most important thing, is to create the dynamic, is to go and create the innovation district where the dynamic is already in place.
Yeah, and making yourself literally attractive is, which you definitely are, is clearly key. Kendall Square, you've got such a sort of dynamic of attraction anyway. You gave us a pretty good list of these outreach and other measures. Any very brief thing you'd like to add? We're almost out of time.
Yes, a couple quick thoughts. I put in the chat a link to our 2-minute highlight video from a recent event, and people may be puzzled why. And it's because that is an event that brings together the entire community for a competitive, collaborative fun, achieving all these challenges. But it's also to support 5 local nonprofits, and we made a donation to those nonprofits that are doing everything from STEM education to environmental conservation. So I think that's emblematic of who we are and shows just how we physically bring people together. The second point is that we really value the development of the local talent pipeline. So we are not only trying to attract and retain the people and organizations that make us hum and be effective, but we need to grow those folks from our nearby neighborhoods. And we have some incredible programs. Almost every single member has a workforce development or training program, and we've seen real growth around us as a result of these. And last point I'd like to make is that we do have a number of maker spaces and communal spaces. And just recently, we are locating the Fab Labs, which support digital fabrication around the globe. An MIT professor has started this, Professor Neil Gershenfeld started this program a decade plus ago. There are 27 digital fabrication labs around the globe, and the headquarters is going to be here in Kendall Square with the premier Fab Lab. So this is really one of our core values, and we try to live it every day.
Thank you very much, Beth, and thank you all. I know it's been a very rapid canter through a lot of material. We will try and pull this together. We're preparing, as Hope said, an evidence synthesis, even though the evidence is a little bit thin in formal academic terms. We will try and use as many of the examples you shared with us as possible, and both have a sort of systems map of how to think about the interacting factors, but hopefully some suggestions and prescriptions as well. And we'll be launching that probably in September. So hopefully watch this space. We may come to you in the interim for further input. Thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.